The deepest betrayals are not committed by enemies. They are committed by the people you trusted enough to lower your guard. The Blood Moon Festival transformed Blackridge Citadel into a sea of crimson banners, glowing lanterns, and thousands of wolves gathered beneath the brilliant autumn sky. Music drifted across the enormous courtyard while children laughed between rows of market stalls. Elders exchanged quiet blessings, and warriors stood proudly in polished ceremonial uniforms. It was the most important night of the year, the evening when every united pack renewed its loyalty to the Alpha King before the Moon Goddess herself. At the center of the celebration stood King Alpha Nathaniel Ashford, dressed in an elegant black ceremonial coat embroidered with silver thread that shimmered beneath the moonlight. Calm, disciplined, and respected across every allied territory, he carried the confidence of a ruler who had never allowed fear or emotion to influence his judgment. Only a handful of trusted advisors remained close enough to stand beside him during the sacred ceremony. Among the guests moved Emily Carter, a young Omega with long chestnut hair, warm hazel eyes, and a simple ivory dress that seemed almost out of place among the expensive gowns surrounding her. She never sought attention. Instead, she quietly carried baskets of food to elderly visitors, comforted frightened children overwhelmed by the enormous crowd, and smiled whenever someone thanked her. Few people noticed her kindness because kindness rarely demanded applause. As the evening reached its brightest moment, the royal orchestra suddenly stopped playing. An uneasy silence settled across the courtyard. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, a horse neighed in alarm. Before anyone could understand what had happened, Emily appeared at the top of the grand staircase leading into the ceremonial square. Her breathing was uneven. Dark stains covered the front of her dress, and strands of hair clung to her face as though she had been caught in desperate circumstances only moments earlier. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Several guards immediately stepped forward. Council members exchanged shocked glances before whispers spread through the thousands gathered below. "Look at her. What happened? That looks like blood." Emily stopped halfway down the stairs. Her eyes searched the crowd until they found Nathaniel. For one brief moment, relief softened her exhausted expression, as though simply seeing him alive made everything she had endured worthwhile. She opened her mouth, then quietly closed it again. She said nothing. Before anyone else could speak, Council Elder Victor Holloway stepped forward with alarming confidence. "Your Majesty," he declared loudly enough for the entire courtyard to hear. "Our scouts discovered evidence that someone attempted to breach the royal security perimeter tonight. Miss Carter was seen fleeing the restricted forest only minutes before she returned in this condition. Until proven otherwise, she must be treated as the primary suspect." The words struck the gathering like a cold winter wind. Nathaniel looked directly at Emily. "Is there anything you wish to say?" His voice remained steady, but there was disappointment beneath its calm surface. Emily met his gaze without looking away. She could have spoken. She could have explained why she had disappeared into the forest. She could have revealed the danger she had intercepted before it ever reached the festival. Instead, she simply lowered her eyes. "No, Your Majesty," she answered softly. "I have nothing to say." Silence swept across the courtyard once again. Nathaniel waited another moment, hoping she would offer even the smallest explanation. None came. Duty hardened his expression. "Until this matter is fully investigated," he announced. "Emily Carter is stripped of all royal privileges and ordered to leave Blackridge territory immediately." No one applauded. No one protested. Emily gave a respectful bow despite the tears gathering in her eyes. Without defending herself or accusing another soul, she turned away and slowly walked through the silent crowd, her stained dress disappearing beyond the palace gates beneath the crimson glow of the blood moon. Hidden among the watching nobles, one man quietly smiled to himself, relieved that the only witness capable of exposing his betrayal had chosen silence instead of the truth. The palace gates closed behind Emily Carter with a deep echo that disappeared into the quiet forest beyond Blackridge Citadel. The sounds of celebration gradually faded until only the steady rhythm of her footsteps remained. Cold autumn wind swept across the narrow mountain road, carrying fallen leaves around her as she walked without looking back even once. The dark stains covering her ivory dress had already begun to dry beneath the moonlight, but she made no effort to wash them away. They no longer mattered. The only thing that mattered was that Nathaniel Ashford was alive. She paused beside an old stone bridge nearly 2 miles from the capital and rested one trembling hand against the weathered railing. Her breathing became uneven as a sharp wave of weakness passed through her body. Carefully lifting the sleeve of her dress, she revealed a faint pattern of dark veins spreading slowly across her wrist. They had not been there that morning. She quietly reached into her satchel and removed a small glass bottle containing only a few pale blue capsules. Royal physician Margaret Hayes had warned her that the poison worked silently. It did not destroy the body overnight. Instead, it slowly weakened the wolf spirit until nothing remained. The medicine could only delay the inevitable. Emily swallowed one capsule with a sip of water before closing the bottle again. She smiled faintly to herself. "A few more days," she whispered. "That will be enough." Earlier that evening, while the kingdom celebrated beneath the blood moon, Emily had wandered toward the northern forest after noticing an unfamiliar figure slipping between the trees near the royal security trail. Curiosity quickly became concern when she discovered 2 masked strangers speaking with someone she recognized immediately. Council Elder Victor Holloway. Hidden behind thick pines, she heard only fragments of their conversation. Payments, royal schedules, guard rotations. Before she could move closer, one loose branch cracked beneath her foot. Every conversation stopped. The strangers turned toward the sound. Emily ran before anyone could reach her. During the desperate chase through the forest, one of the attackers accidentally dropped a silver pendant engraved with Victor's family crest. Emily picked it up without thinking before escaping through the Eastern Trail. When she finally reached the festival, she realized the stains on her dress belonged not only to torn branches and the chaos of the pursuit, but also to someone she had tried to help along the way. She could have exposed Victor immediately. She could have shown Nathaniel the pendant resting safely inside her satchel. But doing so would have forced innocent palace guards to admit they had failed to secure the festival, placing countless loyal families under suspicion while the investigation unfolded. Nathaniel had spent years building trust among the United Packs. Emily refused to let one night destroy that fragile peace. If protecting his kingdom required her silence, she would remain silent. The first light of dawn slowly appeared beyond the mountains as Emily continued north. Hours later, she reached the tiny village of Pine Hollow, where smoke drifted gently from stone chimneys into the crisp morning air. Near the entrance to the village, an elderly woman struggled to gather firewood scattered across the roadside after a broken wagon wool tipped over. Without hesitation, Emily hurried forward despite her exhaustion. Together they stacked the wood into neat bundles, while the grateful woman smiled warmly. "You look like you have traveled a long way," she said kindly. Emily simply nodded. "Just a little farther to go." The woman noticed the stained dress, but asked no questions. Instead, she offered a loaf of fresh bread and a warm wool blanket before Emily quietly continued along the snowy trail leading deeper into the mountains. Behind her, Blackridge Citadel prepared to investigate a crime built entirely upon lies. Ahead of her, the only person carrying the truth walked farther away with every passing mile, believing that protecting the Alpha King would always matter more than protecting herself. Morning sunlight filled the council chamber of Blackridge Citadel, but the warmth never reached Nathaniel Ashford as he listened to the first official reports from the investigation. Captain Owen Brooks stood beside a long oak table covered with maps and witness statements collected throughout the night. One by one, palace guards repeated what they believed they had seen during the Blood Moon Festival. Emily Carter had entered the restricted forest. Emily Carter had returned wearing a dress stained with blood. Emily Carter had refused to explain herself before leaving the kingdom. Every account seemed complete until Nathaniel noticed something strangely missing. "Who actually saw her commit a crime?" he asked quietly. The room fell silent. Captain Brooks lowered his eyes and slowly turned the pages in his report. "No one, Your Majesty." Nathaniel leaned back without speaking. "Who witnessed her attacking anyone?" Another pause followed. "No confirmed witness." Nathaniel's fingers rested lightly against the polished table as an uneasy feeling settled inside him. He had spent years judging disputes based upon evidence rather than rumors. Yet the decision he made only hours earlier had rested almost entirely upon appearances and silence. Before anyone could continue, a young palace guard entered carrying a leather pouch recovered from the northern security trail. "Your Majesty," he said respectfully. "Our morning patrol found this near the edge of the forest where the disturbance occurred." Captain Brooks carefully emptied the contents onto the table. Broken arrows, torn pieces of black cloth unlike any royal uniform, fresh boot prints sketched onto parchment by the tracking team. Then one final report caused everyone to exchange uncertain glances. 3 unidentified individuals fled the northern woods shortly before Miss Carter returned to the festival, Brooks explained. Their tracks headed east toward the old mountain pass. Nathaniel immediately looked up. Why was this not included last night? The captain hesitated. Because we believe those tracks were unrelated after Elder Victor informed us Miss Carter had already been identified as the likely suspect. Nathaniel remained perfectly still. The answer troubled him far more than the discovery itself. Someone had reached a conclusion before the investigation had even begun. Across the chamber, Victor Holloway folded his hands calmly. "Your Majesty," he said with practiced confidence, "criminals often flee after using an accomplice. The Omega's silence speaks louder than any explanation she could have invented." Nathaniel studied the elder for several long moments. Victor's words sounded reasonable. Yet for reasons he could not explain, they no longer felt convincing. His thoughts drifted unexpectedly toward Emily's expression before she walked away. She had not looked frightened of punishment. She had looked relieved that he was unharmed. The memory refused to leave him. Late that afternoon, Nathaniel dismissed the council and walked alone through the quiet palace gardens where golden leaves drifted across empty stone paths. Every corner reminded him of Emily without warning. The bench where she once read stories to village children. The fountain where she left fresh flowers every spring for families who had lost loved ones. The greenhouse where elderly gardeners always smiled whenever she visited with homemade tea. None of those memories matched the image of someone capable of betrayal. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Nathaniel stopped beside the ancient oak overlooking the palace walls. A stable boy approached cautiously, holding a small woven basket. "Your Majesty," the boy said nervously, "Miss Carter asked me to deliver this to the royal kitchens yesterday morning before the festival. She said the children from Pine Hollow deserved fresh apple bread after the celebration." Nathaniel looked inside the basket. The bread was still warm enough to carry the faint scent of cinnamon. She had prepared gifts for strangers only hours before she was accused of treason. Standing alone beneath the fading autumn sky, the Alpha King felt certainty quietly slipping away, replaced by a question that refused to leave his heart. What if the one person everyone believed had betrayed the kingdom had actually been the only one trying to save it? Emily Carter followed the winding mountain road until Blackridge Citadel disappeared behind layers of evergreen forests and rolling hills touched by early frost. Every step became heavier than the last, yet she refused to stop for long. The poison slowly spreading through her wolf spirit had begun stealing more than her strength. Some mornings her hands trembled while tying the straps of her satchel. Other times she struggled to catch her breath after climbing only a gentle slope. Even so, whenever she met someone in need, she somehow found enough strength to keep going. By late afternoon, she reached the quiet farming village of Willow Creek, where worried voices gathered outside a small wooden schoolhouse. A frightened little boy had wandered away while chasing his family's sheep before a cold rainstorm swept across the hills. The villagers searched every nearby trail without success. Emily listened quietly before setting down her satchel. "Which direction was he last seen?" she asked gently. An anxious mother pointed toward a narrow path disappearing into the forest. Without waiting for thanks or recognition, Emily pulled her wool coat tighter around her shoulders and began following the muddy footprints left behind by the child. The search lasted nearly 2 hours beneath steady rain that soaked her already worn clothing. Just before sunset, she heard a faint cry carried by the wind. Hidden beneath the branches of a fallen pine tree sat the missing boy, frightened but unharmed. Emily knelt beside him with a reassuring smile. "Your mother has been waiting for you," she whispered. The child immediately reached for her hand. Together they slowly returned to the village as warm lights appeared one by one inside nearby cottages. The grateful family embraced their son with tears of relief before turning toward the quiet Omega who had brought him home. They noticed her pale face, the exhaustion she tried so hard to hide, and the dark stains still visible across the front of her dress. Please stay for supper, the child's grandmother pleaded. You need to rest. Emily smiled with gentle gratitude, but shook her head. Someone else may need your kindness tomorrow, she answered softly. Save it for them. Before dawn the next morning, she quietly continued north, leaving behind only a grateful village and another story that quickly spread across neighboring communities. Within days, travelers began sharing remarkably similar accounts. An unknown young woman helped repair a broken wagon outside Maple Ridge before disappearing before anyone learned her name. A white-haired veteran claimed a quiet Omega had carried medicine to his isolated cabin during the first snowfall. A widow living beside Silver Lake told everyone that a stranger had chopped enough firewood to last the coming week, leaving before sunrise with nothing more than a thankful smile. Each story described the same chestnut hair, the same calm hazel eyes, and the same worn ivory dress stained by a night nobody fully understood. Back inside Blackridge Citadel, Nathaniel Ashford received reports from merchants, rangers, and village elders as they arrived throughout the day. None of them spoke about betrayal. None accused Emily of harming anyone. Instead, every report described compassion, generosity, and quiet courage offered without expectation of reward. Nathaniel spread the written statements across his desk until they covered nearly every inch of polished wood. One after another, they painted a picture completely different from the woman he had judged beneath the blood moon. As evening settled over the palace, he looked through the window toward the distant mountains where fading sunlight disappeared behind endless forests. For the first time since Emily walked away, he realized something impossible to ignore. Every place she visited became safer because she had been there, while every answer inside the palace only made the original accusation seem more uncertain than ever before. The fifth morning after the Blood Moon Festival began with an unexpected visitor standing outside the eastern gates of Blackridge Citadel. A young royal guard named Daniel Mercer requested a private audience with Nathaniel Ashford before the daily council convened. His face carried the unmistakable weight of someone who had not slept for several nights. Once the chamber doors closed, Daniel removed a small velvet pouch from inside his uniform and carefully placed it on the polished table between them. Your Majesty, he said quietly, I can no longer remain silent. Nathaniel opened the pouch and slowly poured its contents into his hand. A silver pendant engraved with the crest of Council Elder Victor Holloway reflected the morning sunlight. The edge of the pendant carried dark stains that had not completely faded despite someone attempting to clean it. Nathaniel immediately recognized the family crest. Where did you find this? Daniel lowered his head. Miss Carter picked it up during the disturbance in the northern forest. I watched everything from a distance that night. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Then why did you say nothing? The young guard struggled to answer. Because Elder Holloway ordered me to remain silent. He said revealing the truth would create panic during the festival and place the kingdom in danger. I believed him. His voice grew quieter. I was wrong. Nathaniel remained perfectly still as Daniel continued. Miss Carter was never fleeing the palace. She was running toward it. She had discovered strangers meeting with the elder inside the restricted forest. They chased her after realizing she had overheard them. She tried to lead them away from the festival before returning through the eastern staircase. By the time she reached the courtyard, her dress was already covered in blood because she had stopped to help one of our injured scouts hidden along the trail. Nathaniel felt every word settle heavily inside the silence. Daniel reached into the pouch once more and unfolded a weathered piece of parchment recovered beside the pendant. It contained guard schedules, security routes, and ceremonial positions reserved only for members of the Royal Council. Information that should never have reached outsiders. Nathaniel looked toward the doorway. Bring Captain Owen Brooks here immediately. Minutes later, the captain entered, studying the evidence spread across the table. His expression changed the instant he examined the pendant and the parchment together. These security records were copied from the council archives, he said firmly. Only a handful of people had access. Nathaniel slowly turned toward Daniel again. Why tell me now? The young guard swallowed hard before answering. Because yesterday I traveled through Willow Creek while delivering supplies. Every family there spoke about an Omega who rescued a missing child before quietly continuing into the mountains. They thanked her without even knowing her name. He paused, unable to hide the regret in his voice. The woman we condemned was still protecting strangers, while the people responsible for betraying this kingdom continued living comfortably inside these walls. Silence returned once more, but this time it carried an entirely different meaning. Nathaniel closed his hand around the silver pendant until its edges pressed firmly against his palm. The image of Emily standing beneath the blood moon suddenly changed forever. The stains covering her dress had never been proof of guilt. They had been silent evidence of courage. She had returned to warn him after risking everything to protect both him and the kingdom, only to be judged before anyone asked what truly happened. Nathaniel looked toward the palace windows where gray clouds gathered over the distant mountains. For the first time since ascending the throne, he realized the greatest threat to Blackridge Citadel had never entered through its gates. It had been standing beside him inside the council chamber all along. The truth did not arrive with thunder or celebration. It arrived in silence, settling over Nathaniel Ashford like the first snowfall of winter, impossible to ignore and too heavy to escape. After dismissing the council, he remained alone inside the royal library long after every lantern in the palace had been extinguished. Shelves filled with centuries of history surrounded him, yet none of the ancient lessons felt as painful as the one unfolding before his own eyes. He replayed every conversation he had ever shared with Emily Carter, searching for the moment she had given him a reason to doubt her. He found none. Instead, forgotten memories surfaced one after another with startling clarity. He remembered the afternoon she quietly stayed behind after a harvest celebration to help servants clean the Great Hall while honored guests accepted praise for a successful event. He remembered seeing her leave fresh blankets outside the homes of elderly widows before the first winter storm without telling anyone where they had come from. He remembered how frightened children always ran toward her with laughter, while injured wolves somehow relaxed the moment she knelt beside them. None of those memories belonged to a traitor. They belonged to someone who had spent every day protecting people who rarely noticed her sacrifices. Nathaniel closed his eyes as another memory returned with painful precision. During the Blood Moon Festival, just before he pronounced his judgment, Emily had looked directly at him. There had been no anger in her eyes, no resentment, only relief that he was standing safely before her. At the time, he had mistaken that expression for resignation. Now he understood it had been gratitude because the danger she had discovered had failed to reach him. The realization left him unable to breathe for several long moments. He had believed he was protecting his kingdom by sending her away. Instead, he had abandoned the very person who had protected him without asking for recognition. Before sunrise, he summoned Captain Owen Brooks and royal physician Margaret Hayes to his private study. Margaret carefully examined the reports Daniel Mercer had provided before quietly placing another document onto the desk. "There is something else you should know, Your Majesty," she said gently. Nathaniel looked down at the familiar handwriting. It was Emily's medical record. Margaret folded her hands with visible regret. "Several weeks ago, Miss Carter came to me after experiencing unusual weakness. Laboratory tests confirmed she had been exposed to a rare poison that slowly damages a wolf spirit. I prepared medicine that could delay its effects, but there is no permanent cure inside our kingdom." Nathaniel stared at the report in disbelief. "Why was I never informed?" Margaret lowered her eyes. "Emily made me promise not to tell you. She believed you carried enough burdens already. She did not want her illness to distract you from leading the United Pax." Every word deepened the weight pressing against Nathaniel's heart, even while facing a future filled with uncertainty. Emily had chosen to protect his peace instead of seeking his sympathy. He rose from his chair and walked toward the large window overlooking Blackridge Valley, where morning mist drifted between distant pine forests. Somewhere beyond those mountains, Emily continued walking alone while carrying secrets that should never have belonged to her alone. Nathaniel rested one hand against the cool glass. "Prepare my horse," he said without turning around. Captain Brooks nodded immediately. "How many guards shall accompany you, Your Majesty?" Nathaniel remained silent for only a moment before answering with quiet certainty. "Only those I trust with my life." He looked once more toward the endless horizon stretching beyond the kingdom. This journey was no longer about restoring a royal reputation or exposing corruption inside the council. It had become something far more personal. Every mile Emily placed between herself and Blackridge Citadel carried her farther from the only place that should have protected her, and Nathaniel refused to lose another hour before trying to bring her home. The search began before sunrise, when a thin layer of mist still covered the valleys surrounding Blackridge Citadel. Nathaniel Ashford rode at the front of a small company that included Captain Owen Brooks, Daniel Mercer, and 4 of the kingdom's most trusted rangers. He had deliberately refused a larger escort. Every additional rider would only slow them down, and every passing hour placed more distance between him and Emily Carter. Their first stop was Willow Creek, where grateful villagers immediately recognized the description of the quiet Omega with chestnut hair and gentle hazel eyes. The little boy she had rescued proudly pointed toward the northern road. She smiled even though she looked tired, he said. She told me brave people always help each other. Nathaniel thanked the family before urging his horse forward once again. As they continued through forests painted with brilliant shades of gold and crimson, every village shared another piece of Emily's journey. In Maple Ridge, an elderly blacksmith explained that she had repaired the broken harness of a farmer, whose horse could no longer pull his wagon. Near Silver Lake, a widow tearfully described how a stranger had quietly left enough firewood outside her cabin to last the coming week. No one knew Emily's name, yet everyone remembered her kindness. Nathaniel listened to every story in silence, each one becoming another reminder of how little he had truly understood the woman he had condemned. Late that afternoon, the search party reached Pine Hollow, where the village physician welcomed them into a small clinic overlooking the river. The elderly doctor hesitated before placing an empty blue medicine bottle onto the wooden table. Nathaniel recognized it immediately. It matched the medicine Margaret Hayes had prepared for Emily. She arrived here yesterday morning, the physician explained softly. She looked exhausted and nearly collapsed while helping an older traveler cross the bridge. I offered her a bed for the night, but she refused because she believed someone else might need it more. Nathaniel picked up the bottle with careful hands. Only one capsule remained inside. His heart sank as he remembered Margaret's warning. Emily's strength was fading far more quickly than she allowed anyone to see. Which direction did she leave? He asked. The physician pointed toward the snow-covered mountains rising beyond the valley. She followed the old cedar trail. She was determined to reach St. Aurora Monastery. She believed the monks there might know more about rare poisons. Hope flickered inside Nathaniel for the first time in days. He immediately ordered the company to continue north, but nature had already begun closing the mountain passes. Heavy snow started falling before sunset, covering fresh footprints beneath a blanket of white. Even the experienced rangers struggled to follow the trail. Several times they believed they had finally caught up to Emily, only to discover abandoned campfires that had grown cold hours earlier or villagers who sadly explained that she had departed shortly before their arrival. Every missed opportunity deepened Nathaniel's regret. As darkness settled across the mountains, the search party stopped beside a quiet stream to rest there. Horses. Daniel noticed something half buried beneath the snow and carefully picked it up. It was a simple wool scarf embroidered with tiny blue flowers along the edges. Nathaniel recognized it instantly. He had once seen Emily wrap it around the shoulders of a frightened child during the first snowfall of winter because the child looked cold. She had never taken it back. Holding the familiar scarf beneath the silent stars, Nathaniel realized that everywhere Emily traveled, she left behind warmth, comfort, and hope for complete strangers, while she continued walking forward with less strength than anyone realized. Somewhere beyond the frozen ridges, she was still searching for a cure alone, unaware that the Alpha King who had once turned away from her was now following every quiet trace of kindness she left behind, praying he would not arrive too late. By the second evening in the mountains, heavy snow covered nearly every trail leading toward St. Aurora Monastery. Nathaniel Ashford refused every suggestion to wait until morning. The cold wind pushed against him with relentless force, but every delay reminded him that Emily Carter had been walking these same paths alone while carrying a burden no one should have faced without help. Just after sunset, the distant sound of monastery bells echoed across the valley. The small stone sanctuary appeared through the falling snow, its windows glowing with warm candlelight against the dark mountainside. Nathaniel dismounted before his horse had fully stopped and hurried toward the entrance. An elderly monk greeted him with quiet respect. Before Nathaniel could introduce himself, the monk gave a gentle smile. You have come looking for the young woman who arrived before dawn. Hope rushed through Nathaniel's heart. Where is she? The monk's expression softened with sadness. She refused to remain here after learning we could only ease her suffering, not remove the poison completely. She insisted another traveler needed our limited medicine more than she did. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a brief moment. Even now, Emily continued placing strangers before herself. When did she leave? Less than an hour ago, the monk answered. She followed the eastern ridge toward the valley chapel. Nathaniel immediately returned to his horse. Snow continued falling as he and his companions rode through the narrow mountain pass illuminated only by moonlight reflecting across the white landscape. After another mile, Daniel Mercer suddenly pointed toward a small wooden bridge crossing a frozen stream. A familiar figure stood quietly beside the railing, looking across the peaceful valley below. Emily's ivory dress was hidden beneath a simple gray cloak offered by the monks, yet Nathaniel recognized her immediately. He slowly approached, afraid that even one careless word might cause her to disappear once more. Hearing footsteps behind her, Emily turned. Surprise filled her tired hazel eyes as they met his. For several silent moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Nathaniel stepped forward and removed his royal cloak, gently placing it around her shoulders to shield her from the bitter wind. I should have listened, he said quietly. I judged your silence instead of trusting your heart. Emily lowered her eyes. You protected your kingdom. Nathaniel gently shook his head. No, I failed to protect the person who had already protected me. She looked at him with quiet confusion. Nathaniel carefully removed the silver pendant from his pocket and placed it in her hands. We know about Victor Holloway. Daniel told us everything. The investigation uncovered the stolen security records. You were innocent from the very beginning. Emily remained silent, not because she doubted him, but because she no longer had the strength to carry the emotions she had hidden for so many days. Nathaniel noticed the faint dark veins spreading farther across her wrist as she adjusted the sleeve of her cloak. His heart tightened with regret. Margaret told me about the poison, he said softly. Emily looked away toward the snowy valley. There is no reason for you to carry that burden now. Nathaniel stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. Your burdens became mine the moment you risked everything to save my life. Snowflakes settled gently across the quiet bridge as the monastery bells rang once more in the distance. Nathaniel reached into his coat and removed the royal seal of Blackridge. Tomorrow I will return to the citadel, he said with calm determination. I will expose every lie before the United Council, even if it costs me my throne. A crown has no value if it cannot defend the innocent. Emily looked into his eyes for the first time since the Blood Moon Festival. The sincerity she saw there was no longer the confidence of an untouchable king. It was the humility of a man who had finally learned that true leadership begins with admitting when he was wrong. The return to Blackridge Citadel was unlike any royal procession the kingdom had ever witnessed. Nathaniel Ashford did not ride through the gates surrounded by musicians or banners. He entered beside Emily Carter, whose quiet strength had become the reason he was willing to challenge everything that once seemed unquestionable. Word spread quickly across the capital that the Alpha King had called an emergency gathering of every council elder, military commander, and pack representative. By midday, the great ceremonial courtyard where Emily had once stood alone beneath countless accusing eyes was filled once again. The same stone staircase overlooked the crowd. The same crimson banners moved gently in the autumn breeze. Only the truth had changed. Nathaniel stepped before the assembly with the silver pendant in one hand and the stolen security records in the other. Captain Owen Brooks presented the investigation, while Daniel Mercer spoke openly about the meeting he had witnessed in the northern forest. One piece of evidence supported another until the entire chain of deception became impossible to deny. Council Elder Victor Holloway could no longer hide behind carefully chosen words or false confidence. His betrayal of the kingdom was exposed before every united pack, and the council unanimously voted to remove him from every position of authority. Nathaniel accepted the decision without celebration. Justice did not erase what had already happened. When the courtyard finally grew quiet, the Alpha King turned toward Emily. Every eye followed him. Slowly, he descended the same staircase where she had once stood alone beneath suspicion. Stopping only a few feet away, Nathaniel lowered his head before the entire kingdom. Emily Carter, he said with unwavering sincerity, I asked you for an explanation only after others had already judged you. I believed appearances instead of the character you had shown through every act of kindness. You protected my life, protected this kingdom, and protected innocent people even after I failed to protect you. For that failure, I ask your forgiveness. A deep silence settled across the courtyard. No ruler in living memory had ever apologized publicly to someone of lower rank. Emily looked at the people surrounding them, then back at Nathaniel. She saw no pride in his expression, only genuine remorse and the courage to accept responsibility. A gentle smile slowly appeared across her face. A kingdom becomes stronger when its king chooses truth over pride, she answered softly. I forgave you before you ever found me. At that very moment, warm sunlight broke through the clouds above Blackridge Citadel, illuminating the courtyard with unexpected brilliance. The elders quietly raised their eyes as a silver moonbird circled once above the palace before disappearing into the clear blue sky. Many believed it to be a blessing from the moon goddess herself, a silent reminder that compassion always shines brighter than suspicion. Royal physician Margaret Hayes soon returned from St. Aurora Monastery, carrying new medicinal herbs prepared by the monks together with treatments developed inside the royal laboratories. Emily's recovery would require patience, but for the first time genuine hope replaced uncertainty. Weeks later, during the Harvest Festival, the people of Blackridge gathered once again in the same square where Emily had once walked away carrying only silence. This time children ran toward her with joyful laughter. Village families welcomed her with grateful smiles, and warriors respectfully bowed as she passed. Nathaniel walked beside her without ceremony, choosing to stand not ahead of her as a ruler, but beside her as an equal. Together they crossed the courtyard beneath golden autumn leaves, leaving behind the place where judgment had once separated them, and walking toward a future built upon trust, humility, and unwavering kindness. For years afterward, the people of Blackridge told their children that true strength was never measured by power alone. It was measured by the courage to admit a mistake, the grace to forgive one, and the quiet heart that continued choosing kindness even when no one was watching. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite moment, and what message or lesson did you take away from Emily and Nathaniel's journey? Share your opinion in the comments below and join the conversation with fellow story lovers. If you enjoyed this tale, please give the video a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Alpha's Regret Stories. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next exciting story filled with romance, drama, betrayal, and unforgettable twists. See you in the next story.